What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of the TRIFLIX cast, the show where we interview innovative, creative, entrepreneurial, and all those sorts of types. The charity drivers, the people trying to make a difference in the world.
Oh, I didn't know that's who I was.
It is now.
I feel so good about myself just being included in that list. This has been a successful day so far.
Yeah. So out of all the people we've interviewed today, like you said, we're adding one to the list. This is Mr. John Bundick. He is a pastor at not Crossroads.
No.
We were talking about this a second ago. At Columbus Community Church.
The Community Church of Columbus, yeah.
Community Church of Columbus, yes.
Yeah.
And he is the community pastor.
Well,
Connections.
Connections. So
Okay.
yeah, I just had a recent job change back in January. So I went to bed December 31st, the pastor of Community Life. I woke up January 1st, the Connections pastor. And I definitely felt like a whole shift in my entire world right there in that. And so.
Yeah. No, okay. Sarcasm. Okay. So I assume the responsibilities changed a little bit.
Right? Oh, there were a ton of changes,
Okay,
responsibilities, but yeah.
I mean, you still woke up and you put your pants on the same way.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah. Three
Right
legs
on.
at a time.
Three. All right. So people may not know you, and you gave a little brief introduction there, but could you explain who you are as far as your role within the church, and maybe like a little bit within the community? What are you up to?
Oh, the who am I question.
The who are you, man?
Yeah, I just got to talk about this for a week with a bunch of high school students. Anyway, John Bundick. Right now, I've got, like, I like to say I've got 3 gigs. I've got one that pays me, one that gives me free T-shirts, and one that I do because I love it, I guess. And so the paying gig is I'm the Connections pastor at Community Church of Columbus, which is great because Community Church of Columbus is actually where I went to church when I was in high school. And so I did student ministry there when I was a kid, and it's kind of a full circle thing. So I'm working there on staff. So my role, kind of big picture there, is making sure that people who are at CCC are connected, whether that's through membership in our community groups, doing that sort of thing. I also make sure that CCC stays connected to the community. So the question basically I'm asking or answering is, if CCC were to disappear tomorrow, would it matter? Like, are we making a difference in the community that is Columbus? And answering how we can do what I like to call local justice well. How are we feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, giving water to the thirsty, that sort of thing. And so I get to do that on staff. And then also just some this, that, and the other. So the thing that gives me T-shirts is I'm a volunteer throws coach at Columbus North, which is where I went to high school.
So throws, shot put, and
discus. Yeah. And I'm a much better coach than I was an athlete, and I'm not that great of a coach. I'm actually, what I like to say is, I'm not the assistant throws coach. I'm like the assistant to the throws coach. Jordan Sharp, who's our actual throws coach, he's amazing. He's a great guy. I get to help him out a couple days a week. We've got some amazing athletes, got some amazing students. I really love being part of that athletic tradition that happens here in Columbus. And it does feel good to wear the old blue and white still, as I'm, cruising well past 30. And so I do that. And then my final gig that I do on a regular basis is I am one of the chaplains. We got 5 chaplains at the Columbus Police Department. And so this April will be I'll be wrapping up my 2nd year as a chaplain there.
Really?
And so I do that. Doesn't pay, but get to see a lot of Columbus and get to interact with 89 men and women who do law enforcement, and kind of get to walk alongside them in life. And I really enjoy that. So yeah, so those are like the 3 gigs.
So you said one that pays, one that gets shirts, and one that you love?
Yeah. I mean, I love all of them,
right?
But like for the love of the game, I guess basically is the last one. Yeah. There's no free T-shirts.
Yeah.
I mean, Chief Richardson, if you're watching, I will always take a free T-shirt. So
of course.
So
I mean, why not? I mean, it's good to represent your local defense.
I mean, really, at the end of the day, who hates a free T-shirt? So, a friend of mine, Tony London.
I mean, I was just talking about supporting the police department.
I mean, there's that too. Yeah,
I mean, there's shirts too.
I mean, I'm just talking about the free T-shirt. But my friend Tony London, who has a company, local business here, tells a story, and it's one of his favorite stories about like why you should give out T-shirts. And I mean, of course, he's got an angle because he's selling T-shirts, right? But he goes, I saw this video of Paul McCartney, who, Paul McCartney, right? He's
right.
I don't know who knows Paul McCartney. He's famous.
Who's Paul McCartney?
He sang some songs once with this band that was really into bugs, I guess. The Beatles. I think they're from the United Kingdom.
I think at one point they claimed to be more popular than Jesus. So
they're
pretty well known.
A couple people have maybe heard of them. Anyway, Paul McCartney's like at a Lakers game and gets like a free $5 T-shirt courtside from like the T-shirt cannon and like loses his mind. He goes, "This is a guy who like a $5 T-shirt, and yet he gets this free T-shirt and loses his mind," because everyone loves a free T-shirt, no matter how wealthy you are. Like you get a free T-shirt, it's like free T-shirt, right?
Yeah.
So because we all like memories. So
no, that's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I do. Not the T-shirts, the other stuff.
Yeah. So out of all those three, you said you love them all, but what is your favorite? Is there like one that stands out of I don't know, you received the most positive emotion, or you associate it more with positive feelings?
So I do all three because I love them all, right? And they kind of hit very different things. So like working at CCC, one of the things I love about that is that it is connected to a thing that I've wanted to do since I was like in high school. So summer after my sophomore year of high school, up until that point, I thought I was going to be an English teacher. I really loved literature. Like, I'm not a grammarian. There are two types of English teachers in the world, is what I've generally found. There might be a third type, which is like, this is what I found I could do and not have to work too hard, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
but it seems like that's a poor choice to do.
I can speak and read.
I can be an English teacher. It's not at all hard or important, except it is. But there are two types of English teachers. There are grammarians, who are people who love what I like to call the math of language, right?
Yeah.
It's formulaic, it's systematic, like, except for really the English language, which is it's like I before E, except after C, and like 29 other exceptions. But so they're grammarians, and then there are people who are primarily literature people. They love stories. They love the art of storytelling and reading and books and that sort of kind of critical thinking kind of part of it. Yeah. And not that grammar is not critical thinking, but just like that idea of like, how do I take literature, apply it to culture and that sort of thing. And so that really captured my imagination, captured my attention. I had some really fantastic English teachers my freshman and sophomore year. Mimi Hageman at North, and then Cindy Sturgis.
Shout out Mimi.
Yeah, too, Cindy Sturgis, and like as well, right? Yeah,
all of them.
Oh,
Cindy
yeah, and then
Sturgis.
I had Dennis Lindsay my junior and senior year, and anyone who had Mr. Lindsay, it's a game changer to have him, and all of education became poorer as these people like were retiring out. Anyway. But I found a real love for storytelling, a real love for literature in particular, and had teachers who were really passionate about their craft. And so I thought I was going to be an English teacher. And summer after my sophomore year of high school, I was at Hilltop Christian Camp over in Brown County, Indiana, and kind of realized that
attending or
I was attending.
Okay, and what is Hilltop?
It's a church camp. For those who've never been to church camp, it's hot, sweaty, usually in the middle of nowhere. Food is usually fair to middling to good. Hilltop had good food. And, there's awkward, like, are they going to hold hands or aren't they? And there's always, like...
For prayer?
Shall pilgrim's hands do as pilgrim's lips? I had that backwards. Shall pilgrim's lips be as pilgrim's hands? That's a bad Romeo and Juliet quote. Yeah, right? And then they kiss. If you haven't read the book, I'm sorry, or read the play or seen it, I'm sorry I ruined it. But
spoilers.
Yeah, you get the sparking situation
for a play that was written hundreds of years ago.
Oh yeah, and not his best work for a long time. Thought I hated Shakespeare. Nope, just hate that play. So yeah,
I cut you off. So
sorry. Hilltop. So and so that's where I started. That summer, I realized that one, like so much of my life had been oriented towards ministry. The things that I really loved, I loved telling people about Jesus. I loved seeing that growth in people as much as like a sophomore in high school can understand what they love, which I think is a lot. I think it's more than we give them credit for. Understanding life.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's like not unguided, but like
it's like
concentrated. Like it's not.
It's like you get a nugget of like who you're going to be over the rest of your life if you're paying attention. And so, and this one was like, oh, maybe what I'm being called into. And I use that call language pretty loosely because there was like no booming voice from the heavens. There's no like writing on the wall or anything like that. But what I realized is that everything I was doing with my life anyway was ministry, whether it was volunteering for Youth for Christ. I got to be a student leader there. Wilbo Hull was my leader there, leading various kind of ways that I've been working in the church and doing even a ministry startup with some of my buddies. And so love that. So, so the CCC gig is just an extension of what I've been doing over the course of a lot of years. Spent a lot of time doing student ministry, worked with junior and senior high students, and I love that so much.
What is that?
Oh my gosh. So junior hires are weird, in like the best way possible, and also smell funny. Not all of them all the time, but most of them some of the time. And they're just weird. And there's this weird vulnerability that junior hires know how, because junior hires, I'll be 100% honest, 7th and 8th graders now are much cooler as 7th and 8th graders than I was back in the 1900s as a 7th and an 8th grader, right?
Yeah. I was talking to my fiance about that. Like, just the way they dress, their sense of style, I don't know, maybe the internet's helped with that.
Oh, I definitely think there's a huge social media presence on this, because it's this idea of like they are constantly being watched, and they are constantly performing for an audience that is both invisible but very present. And so I think this like there brings this sort of sad sophistication that I'll call it. And it's not sad because it's like the kids, oh, it's so sad. It's sad because they feel like there's this constant pressure to be a thing or to be a person or to do this, like to fit this image. But what it brings is this very real sophistication that I guess I'll say, to like raising their game in a lot of ways that, I mean, in the 7th grade, I was still a big 6th grader, right? And so there's that. Anyway, I love them and I love that aspect. But high school students, because the question junior hires ask is like, do you like me? And high school students are like, why do I care if you like me? And the do you like me is real nice, because it's like, oh, yeah, I do. And then junior hires will do the dumbest things if they think you like they will eat the weirdest foods and that kind of stuff. It's just, games. And but then
we've never done that.
No, never. But high school it becomes this question of like, do I care if you like me? Which is a question of, are you invested in me? And being able to walk with high school students and have some really hard critical conversations. And high school students have this propensity towards like moments of just the dumbest thing possible, followed by this clarity and brilliance that I just really loved. And there's this potential there in adolescence to shape and form and be alongside someone to help them move towards greatness. So often we talk about next gen, or like someday you'll be a future leader. It's like, no. These are the people who like are changing the world now, and to be invested in them and to be able to say like, I'm not going to change the world in the same way you are, but I get to be part of your story. Right. I get to invest in it. That is an amazing privilege, to be able to see like this goofy 7th grader turn into this like, kind of stumbling through themselves, kind of sophomore in high school, and then by their senior year being this young man or young woman who are becoming these people who are like really moving out into the world to do really beautiful, amazing things, and to be able to say like, I got to be part of that. And then years later, hearing the stories of like, hey, this is what I'm doing, and just getting to say like, oh, that is amazing. And so I really love that. Now I'm not doing that as much. I work with some 18 to 25-year-olds through the gathering, and also through...
Yeah, those guys are the worst.
Oh, they are, aren't they, Tristan? I mean, starting businesses and stuff and having a sweet podcast.
Nothing interesting.
Oh, my gosh. But so I still get to do some of that, and that's been really cool.
Do you want to do a plug for that real quick?
What?
What's the 18 to 25? How does one connect if they are 18 to 25?
Okay, well, I got 2 avenues I can push this afternoon or morning or whenever you're watching, listening to this. However, I'm in your ears right now, which is a weird thing to think about, that they're like I'm in someone's ear right now, but not like in their ear.
I mean, some people listen with speakers, but I see what your point is. You're.
Oh yeah. No, I just feel like we're like an earbud sort of generation.
It depends.
Okay.
I think it depends on the individual. I prefer like the headphones.
Yeah. Anyway, so
how can they find you? So
the gathering is it's a collective of 3 churches. So it's Community Church of Columbus, New Hope Christian Church, and then also First Christian Church. And right now we're in our spring schedule, so we're meeting like the 3rd Thursday of every month until May. And so it's like from 7:30 till 9. Kind of changes in shape kind of week by week, month by month. But basically what we're walking through is the way I like to talk about it is it's a conversation in real life, theology, and who I want to be, basically. Like these kinds of things, like how do all these things intersect? Like it's practical skills, it's dealing with like scripture in the Bible, and like, do I have a Christian faith? Do I not? Am I exploring faith? These kinds of things. and that sort of thing. And so once we roll into May, we'll be kind of week by week, every week, 7:30 to 9. And
plus, it's just a good place to. I feel like 18 to 25 in Columbus, at least, it's hard to make meaningful connections with people because it's not like a huge college hub. So like in that bracket, it is nice to like find peers that are interested in some of the similar topics, whether that be Christianity or maybe they just want to develop. And
yeah, I mean, we have people
friends
who have like little to no interest maybe in Jesus, but they are interested in finding community and finding a place to land. And so so that's one place. We'll be kicking off our 1825 ministry at CCC actually starting in March, 1825, which I have not really talked about this anywhere yet.
I haven't heard about this yet.
Well, it's like brand new.
This is going to be the clip. This is what gets shared.
This is the thing. This is the thing right here. So 1825 is going to be CCC, Community Church of Columbus. It's going to fall into, under, I guess, my direction. It's weird to say. I've got a thing under my direction. But it's our specific just community group. And so it's just specific moments throughout the year. We'll have a couple of events a year to specifically for our 18 to 25-year-olds or people who maybe aren't connected to church anywhere else to say, like, okay, I'd like to see what it's like to be part of the CCC community, specifically like in the 18 to 25. And 1825 is for people who are ages 18 to 25, and I'll say like 25-ish, right? We'll give like a year or two or so in there because like it, different things for different people, right?
Yeah, everybody grows at a different pace.
Yeah,
and sometimes you just as a leader you get to make that executive decision to say, I think you're ready for the next group, or I think you'd benefit from still sticking around if you want to hang out a little longer.
Mostly people just get sick of me and decide that they want to move on. So that's
the reason it's based on community too, though.
Yeah,
because if it's just a mentorship, if a mentorship stops at mentoring, once you've acquired all the information or knowledge or whatever it is you went there for, okay, next thing. But if there is community and there is a relationship, you'll still want to connect with those people outside of 1825.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's been the thing that has been good is like former students, when we talk about student ministry, becoming friends, when we talk about people in this 1825, kind of like the gathering age, where it's not just like, oh, I'm like their pastor or whatever, but people are just genuinely like hanging out with and spending time with, and it's not like, well, this is a word thing, so I'm definitely gonna like write this into the calendar or whatever, but having that opportunity to just be friends with people. So
it worked out for me, I guess.
I mean, I like you.
Yeah, well, as far as the community aspect of it, I mean, we don't meet. Like, I hang out with people from the gathering that I had met through the gathering specifically, hadn't had any relationships with them prior, and we hang out outside of that group. 2 of the 4 people in my wedding's coming up, so 2 out of the 4 people.
Oh, you're getting married? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Sorry, ladies, he is taken.
I am. I got a promise ring somewhere, but I took it off because of the clacking on the table.
Yeah, I took my ring off because of the table. Yeah, honestly, my wife already knows I lost my ring like a while ago. So I'm ordering a new one. It's fine. So I'm just bad at things like that.
Yeah. No, it's sometimes you just gotta own up and be honest. But the two of the 4 people of my groomsmen are people that I'd met through the gathering, and one of them, David Baker, who I think he's one of the first few people we interviewed on here. He works here. He's one of my close friends.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So if it weren't for the gathering, my business probably wouldn't be it may not even exist now. Honestly, David has done so much. He's very technical. He's the one that makes all of this stuff technically work. I mean, I can run cameras, but he's the guy that runs the servers and makes everything streamlined and efficient.
Yeah. So David, like, can we talk about David for a second?
Let's talk about David.
I would love to talk about David.
David Baker.
David Baker is this guy because so at CCC, he like, so if you go to community church and you drink coffee on Sunday morning, David Baker is the guy that if you see him, you need to say thanks because he makes it happen. He is there every week. There are these like soft skills that I think sometimes are missing in for lots of reasons. And if you want to do like an hour-long detour and like generational stuff, I'm more than happy to do that. I don't think anyone cares. But he has developed these real key leadership abilities, like showing up on time, like communicating clearly, like his expectations, what he can do, what he can't do.
His work ethic in general.
He's got a great work ethic. And David is a guy, he's a man that I really respect. And We are so lucky to have him at CCC as part of our volunteer team, as part of the hospitality and welcome team. He's been awesome there. He's shown up at a couple other places doing stuff, and he is just genuinely like a good man and really cares about people. And he's the kind of man that I just really respect in my heart. Because he has, like, to see him grow and to just, like, these kind of things. This is, like, maybe weird. People are like, who's this David Baker guy?
Who's David Baker?
Who is David Baker? He's the best guy you haven't met yet. That's who he is.
Yeah.
So, and anyway, but David, what David leads me to is just, like, being able to, like, walk with people in their stories. Is what I love about being a student pastor. It's what I love about, it's part of what I love about ministry, is just being able to walk with people in their stories. And anyway, to wrap up the David Baker talk. He is an amazing good guy, and I just love his presence and his heart. And so I'm glad that you had him on, because he's a good guy to have a conversation with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we brought you on to talk about what you're passionate about. Clearly,
I'm a little passionate about David Baker. So no, I really,
he's a cool guy. He's
cool.
Well-rounded gentleman. I remember when we first met, he was like that middle school age. I mean, I didn't meet him in middle school, but like it was that you see him in that early development. You see all of us in the early development, and then over the 2 to 3 years, going from, I think most of us joined probably around the age of 20.
Yeah.
So 20 to 23 or 18 to 22, in that range, you can see a lot of development in people. So I think that's pretty cool, because I actually got to see that too, and that's something you get to see with most of the people you interact with.
Yeah, and it is cool, and it is great. And the hardest, like, it's like one of the hardest parts of this is, you build that relationship, and then everyone like takes off to do these amazing things around the world, right?
Well, I mean, it's partly your fault. I hear you send people job applications for out-of-state places.
I mean, if I think a job fits a person and I happen to get it, like, and I know a person is, as much as I don't want them to leave, I want them to succeed.
Right.
And so it's like, I think this is a thing where you might win. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Talking about things that we want to succeed in.
Stuff
win.
and things.
How about a sponsor, man?
Oh yeah. So do you have a sponsor? Is this sponsored by anyone?
This is sponsored.
Who's it sponsored by?
Do you know what that means?
I don't know.
It means that people out there want to support what we're doing. And that people, that specific group for today's episode is Hill Zion Records, and it is.
I love records.
You do?
I do.
All right. Well,
they like do stuff with music?
They do so much with music. In fact, I think they entirely do things with music. They make lots of it. Some rap, some hip hop, some a little bit of R&B. They got a couple artists on this Hill Zion Records. It's a record label based out of Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee.
They're the only 10 I see.
They are, and we want them to succeed. I didn't have a pun there, but but I did a hand gesture, and I feel like that was good enough.
Yeah.
So it is a Christian record label based out of Nashville, Tennessee. So if you want something a little more upbeat, maybe nothing wrong with K-Love, but a lot of K-Love is a little slower, and sometimes it's good to get that. And sometimes you need some Hill Zion Records to come in with some elevated, some energy to that Jesus music.
Oh, you are speaking my language. I like a nice solid beat. My son and I, we love the dirty beats. So do they have dirty beats for us to like partake in?
They have some slappers. They really hit hard.
Okay,
man.
All right.
They got a couple. Actually, I've heard. Okay, jumping off of Hill Zion, because you brought up your son, and I love your son. Andrew's awesome. He has a 4, 5.
Oh, he turns 4 in 6 days.
4. Okay, so we're gonna say he's a 4-year-old kid. I hear you guys are kind of coaxing him a little bit, like you're leading his style of music in a way.
We have been listening to a lot of very specific music over the past 4 years.
And we're already talking about seeing the development of people, and specifically those middle schoolers and those 18 to 25-year-olds. But I'm curious of how this kid's developing, because I hear he listens to some great tunes.
So lately, and there's going to be there's going to be some level of judgment here.
I mean, you can preface a little bit.
No. There's no preface needed. I'll be honest as I can. And so lately he's been asking for rock and roll, which specifically means Fall Out Boy, and even more specific than just Fall Out Boy, which is my fault because I listen to Fall Out Boy.
That's a great group.
Yeah, but he really likes their Save Rock and Roll album, the Phoenix song. which he knows most of the words to that song. And so on a good morning when I'm taking him to daycare, is in the back seat. Like, Dad, can we listen to rock and roll? I'll put it on. And then, like, in the background, I'll hear my son, like, singing the lyrics. I'm going to raise you. And but it's like, so he's 4, and it's, like, a little off time, but the lyrics are right. And it's, like, we have this moment in the car where we're singing together. I can't sing. Clearly, we just saw that. But he loves it. We have I will say it's his favorite album. He wasn't able really to talk at this point. So, like, in his first, especially year of life, as we've got him home and trying to get him to sleep and that kind of thing. The album that we listened to over and over and over and over and over again was Dave Matthews and Tim Reynolds live at Luther College. So for those of you who existed in the 1900s, you're aware of the magic, of the beauty of this album. And so, but by satellite, my son, like that first night, satellite, like my son is just like, and just like just with this like big smile, just falling asleep every time. And so that like, I'm counting that as his favorite song.
That's awesome.
First few years. Imagine Dragons, which is not my fault. Like, I don't know if you've got opinions on Imagine Dragons, but my son discovered him, I think, on the radio. It came on Radioactive, and then there's another song. Oh, Thunder, which was in one of the Cars movies. He wanted to listen to that song over and over again. Muddy Waters. We've listened to a lot of Muddy Waters for those of you who, because again, like, I'm trying to like give my son this huge perspective of music.
Right. I feel like a lot of times people get put in niches, and it's like they're told what's cool. You know, like, oh, the Hicks listen to country. It's like, I like country. Like,
I like country.
And you don't realize it until you try it, and you're letting him try it just earlier. Yeah,
and so he's got some preferences. He seemed to take a liking to Dave Crowder. Now there's like 2 versions of Crowder. There's like what I like to call Goatee Crowder, which was like the early days, and then which I like speaks to my heart because that was like a really important part of my life, and like the Illuminate album, one of my favorite albums. But my son really likes when Crowder has gone full on trucker hat Crowder. Is maybe the best way to put it. And so that's been good. I'm trying to think. So my son is really into this movie, and he got me into it, which was Into the Spider-Verse, right?
It's a great movie.
Oh my gosh, like, of course that movie wins awards. It's fantastic, but the soundtrack is just baller. Like, it is a banging soundtrack, right? And so that song "What's Up Danger" is my son's, like, it's kind of in my mind. If I were to pick a theme song for my son, it is "What's Up Danger," because he has this. Like, he's always like, he wants to be upside down, he wants to be thrown, he wants to run around, and like, he knows, again, like, most lyrics to this song, and so like "What's Up Danger" is a song that I love, that my son loves it, and also my favorite moment in that film happens to that song, right? So it's this. If you haven't seen Into the Spider-Verse and you don't want any spoilers, I'd say skip ahead like 45 seconds.
Okay,
maybe a minute. I'm long-winded, about a minute. Okay, you're skipping. So there's this scene where Miles Morales is leaping off of a building, and he's fully embraced.
That's Spider-Man.
That's the Spider-Man. Again, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you've seen it.
I mean, Peter Parker.
Well, I mean, Peter Parker's my Spider-Man. Miles Morales is my son's. Yeah. But he's leaping off of this building, and he's fully embracing what it means to be Spider-Man, right? And not just any Spider-Man, but what it means for Miles Morales to wear the mask, to be Spider-Man. Yeah. And so they do this thing where they invert the animation so that instead of falling down into the city, like, he is rising into the city, which is like this overall representation of like him rising to what it means to be Spider-Man, rising to the challenge, rising to like this fight to go join the other Spider-Men, and also one Spider-Woman.
It gets complicated.
It does. You have to see the movie. And if you're just joining, I'm not done talking about it, so maybe another 30 seconds. And so he rises into it, and it's this song of like the beat drops on this scene, and it's just like, it is beautiful. It is. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I see it, and because like I see my son in it, and I see like his identification with Miles Morales, like, it does make me kind of go Armageddon crying. So
no, that's actually I was thinking a lot about that lately. Just how cinema, or how media, whether it be music or whatever, impacts people's emotions. And one of the reasons I wanted to get into video was because I always struggled with like identifying emotions and stuff. I'm very analytical, but I liked it whenever I would watch things like Green Mile, and you see like all these emotions built up in these people, and it's like, oh, these terrible things are happening to this like, good guy. and what that invokes inside like the human spirit, like what everybody is like crying at these scenes versus, you know, Anakin sans coarse and rough, and I say it's everywhere. It's like, all right, that's the opposite. That is the opposite of where you want to go. Like, you want to invoke these emotions. I'm glad I got you with that one. But and then I started realizing, like, why don't I experience that anymore? And I mean, partly as you get older, you get used to things, you expect things, and that comes with it. But I realized, like, so much media is based on, like, nostalgia now. And it's like, yes, original works are more likely to invoke, like, an actual true emotion. But, like, nostalgia is this fake way of invoking emotion because it's relying on past experience with the same content.
Yeah.
Versus watching something and you reflecting on yourself or your own circumstances. And like, that's why I like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse so much, just because it was new, it was fresh, and it wasn't relying on nostalgia. Because I mean, like, there was some like fan service occasionally, but that wasn't what drove people in.
No, like, because I like Spider-Man. I like this you know, as a kid, the comic books that I would typically get were Spider-Man comics, and so like I have this love for Spider-Man, but this was like a whole different thing, and it was you know, I think what they did well was a unique take on Spider-Man and his existence, these kinds of things. But no, and I think when you talk about nostalgia, trying to evoke emotion with and feelings with nostalgia is that we have become, and I'm going to say we, I am an elder millennial. So I was born in 84, so I was raised by boomers, not by Xers.
Yeah, so we're actually both ends of the bracket. I'm 96.
So you're like the very tail end.
Yeah, so we are millennial.
And look at you. You've got a business and a job, and you didn't even get a trophy. Like,
graduated debt free.
Oh, snap.
Thank you, family. Thank you for all that supported me, those that let me stay with them, those that helped contribute, all the scholarships, including Heritage Fund, who we shouted out in the last video.
Yeah, look at all this gratitude from like a young millennial. This is amazing. The other day, actually, it was yesterday. I walked into the office and was like, I did my job, and like I was talking about like this thing that I was really excited about doing. Is like, I'm like. And yeah, just so everyone knows, I'm a millennial, and yeah, I need a trophy. So, and to which everyone in the office at the time was like a boomer or whatever. Was like, oh my gosh. So they thought it was funny.
Yeah, I jumped your subject.
I can't even remember what we're talking about.
We were talking about nostalgia.
Oh yeah, instant nostalgia, and I think this is also a thing that we're starting to see with Gen Z. Is this idea of we want instant nostalgia. We want to like, oh, remember when, like. So, because we're not creating stories. I think what we're seeing in what film studios are doing.
Well, that's the Marvel. Marvel's doing it a little bit. I mean, they're relying on comics, and I think they did a really good job making it original with phases 1 through 3. But if you look at all of the Disney live animation remakes, there's no difference between them and the cartoons. Like it's
cheaper. You don't have to pay people to write things anymore.
But what they do, I was actually listening to this a little bit, and I'll let you jump back in on it. But what they're doing is they look at those age demographics of who watched the cartoons when they came out. They wait 30, 40 years. They release it, and those are the parents that are taking their kids to it. So now their kids are hooked on it. And another 30 to 40 years, they're going to release the Disney Vault and release remastered versions in 8K. And it just relies on nostalgia for sales. And they actually
needs 8K?
They project their sales based on it, too.
That is crazy. Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on cinema and repeats, nostalgia, and all that stuff?
Well, I think it's reflective of culture, right? And so, because like we're not creating, I mean, we are creating new content. There is interesting new content that's happening. I think we're seeing this, especially with streaming services and even YouTube. You get to see some creators in smaller places do that. We have some breakouts, kind of in the larger world as well.
Jojo Rabbit.
I have not seen JoJo.
It just won a lot of awards.
Well, good for the rabbit. It's not really about a rabbit. I'm pretty sure it's about Nazis.
The lead actor's Hitler.
Okay. Can you talk about anything on the internet without Hitler eventually being mentioned?
I mean, no.
Okay. But anyway, so what we're seeing is just like a repeat. And so, but I think this is a reflection of what's happening is that we as people are real bad at creating new stories, because we're real bad at just living as people together, right? One of the things that I saw as a student pastor, I see working with 18 to 25-year-olds, is that there is this difficulty in having genuine, real friendships. which as you move out of your family as your primary relationship into your chosen relationships, which is what happens in adolescence. The thing that parents often complain about is like, my kid never wants to be around. That's actually healthy and normal, is that your kid should want to have, if you've done things really well, your kid should want to have friendships outside of the home, because what they have a solid enough self-understanding and self-awareness to begin interacting with friends.
What age does that usually occur, or have you noticed it in?
So depending on which theorist you're talking about, it's usually the early onset of adolescence. So physical adolescence and social adolescence are not necessarily the same thing at the early ages, kind of depending on what country you're in and a bunch of other things, even regions of this country, different ages. But you have they kind of coincide because of kind of what's happening in the brain. Anyway, all that to say, your kids should want to make friends with people outside the home and spend time with them, because if you've done your job well, they're secure enough to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But because kids aren't doing that well, they're not having intimate friendships. And a lot of times when I talk about intimacy with like high school students or college students or whatever, the first thing they think about is like physical intimacy, which is not at all. Like, in fact, you can be physically interact with someone and have no intimacy at all, right? Intimacy is this ability to have a genuine, real relationship with someone where they see the way I like to talk about it is they get to see the sacred parts of your heart. That you trust them with not just the sad things in your life, but also your hopes and your dreams, that when they confront you and say, hey, this is a thing that I see in you that's not like real healthy or good, like, you don't respond by shutting them down. You actually invite them in to help you kind of put your things in order, and they walk alongside you. That's what friendship is. And the thing that I see so often in students is that they don't know how to have friendships. And so I think when we talk about larger media culture, it's reflecting this, in that we're just repeating what we've seen. The kids are repeating what they've seen, but they aren't creating new stories. They're not creating new friendships. And so when this happens, like if you ask some students, do you have friends? They'll say yes. Well, what's a friend? It's someone to hang out with. And even as you start to dig in, even though they don't have maybe the large like terms that you're supposed to have or whatever, that usually, I mean, 10 years ago when I first started student ministry, my students would be able to tell me what a friend was. They'd be able to say, it's a person who I share my life with, someone who confronts me when I'm doing things that are wrong, someone who wants the best for me, someone who supports me, but not like blindly, someone that sometimes I disagree with, someone who I have a shared story with, right? But for most of, not most, but for a lot of students I've interacted with, especially ones who are lonely, which is what we've got I think a real issue of loneliness in this country. Yeah, are kids who the only thing that a friend is someone that I share space with, and
almost like an accessory.
Yeah, and 100% supports you no matter what, and that's not a good friend. I mean, you've probably heard me say this like once or twice, like at the gathering. Is like, when you go to get married, if you don't have 3 or 4 friends in your life that if they said, I think this is a bad idea, that you would be like, oh, I need to really reconsider, you probably shouldn't be getting married. One, because there shows like maybe a lack of growth in the ability to have to build significant relationships where there's confrontation and difference. But also, friends help us overcome the dumbness that we have when we are in love, and like in those early kind of puppy love infatuation stages, to say like, this person maybe not be good for you, right?
All the brain chemicals are flying and you're not thinking straight.
Yeah, hire a reasoning center. Who needs it? Right?
Well, I mean, it doesn't help that I assume you're speaking from your experience with middle school and high schoolers going into college when their brain's still developing, and it's all new experiences, so they can't even relate it to anything. Like, this is completely new.
Yeah, they're not stupid. They're novices, right?
Why don't you know better? Because I haven't learned it yet.
Right, and that's the beauty of like, I don't know. Okay, so what I know is like Bible stuff. So like the Book of Proverbs, right?
Okay.
So the Book of
It's one of the
Proverbs,
best.
if you follow it through, is actually kind of the journey of someone who becomes wise and someone who becomes a fool. And the idea is everyone starts off at kind of the same level of fool, right? And this is not like my original research. This is Richard Smith from Taylor University is the one who I first heard discuss this. He was my Hebrew professor, had him for Old Testament, these kind of things. But as we were talking about Proverbs, which is like one of his areas of specialty, right? Is this idea that you see the progression of everyone starts off as a novice. And it's not your fault. That's just what you are.
Yeah.
Wisdom because someone who is doing wise things is a person who's actively making choices, who's making choices towards righteousness, in kind of the Judeo-Christian ethic, someone who's living into the commands of Yahweh, these sorts of things. The fool is a person who either makes no choices, because making no choice is actually making an active choice.
Yeah.
And so you become a fool over time, and you become wise in being a fool, which is what moves you into wickedness, where you become wise and like helping people like do the things that are the term I would use in Christendom or Christianity would be anti-kingdom, anti the things of God, anti
moving
the
away.
goodness. Yeah, and so our junior high and senior high students are novices, and so it's not their fault. They're not dumb. They're inexperienced, and so again, this privilege that we as adults in this world, whether we have kids or not, is to come alongside them and impart wisdom, which is our learned life experience over time, put into real practical ways to like hand that off to someone else. Like, hey, you know what you should do in your 20s? You should really get a Roth IRA. Doesn't matter if you don't have a ton of money. You should do that. That's the kind of thing that a lot of our like junior high and high school students, as they're getting their first jobs, they don't know. Either because family systems, that's not a thing that's talked about, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But to have an older mentor, to have someone speaking like, oh, so you're making like $100 a week yet now. That's great. You really should only be spending about 50 of that. Here's what you should be doing with the other 50, because we're thinking about your future, right? Which is not a thing that you think about, because future thinking is not natural, right?
Do you have recommendations for parents of kids at that age, or like kids at that age that would like be interested in learning more about that type of?
Yeah. So if you're a parent, so we'll start with parents. Parents, here's the thing that I would say. One, if you've got a Christian faith, right? And I don't assume everyone who's going to watch this does, but if you do, and you're interested in like, how do I help my child like maintain a Christian discipleship faith, after they're done with high school, there's a book. It's called Sticky Faith. It's research based. It comes out of the Fuller Youth Institute, Fuller Seminary out in Pasadena, California. Did research with a bunch of other top-notch schools and universities about like, basically faith practice in America. And they came up with some things that are really important for parents to do. One of which is make sure that your student has other adults who share your values that they're speaking into, because it's that famous thing of like, you say the same thing and your kid looks at you like you're an idiot, but then like the youth pastor says it and they come home and like, I can't believe how brilliant Adam is. He said this thing, and it's like, I've been saying that for months, right?
Yeah, I mean that could happen with spouses too, or fiancés.
I don't know that we want to have that discussion.
I'm just saying, there's been many instances where like I'll talk to somebody, they'll tell me a thing, I don't retain it as well as I should have, and I'll hear someone else say it, and I'll go back to that original person, and be like, look at this, listen to this gospel I've received, and they're like, I told you 6 months ago. So I can definitely relate. I don't think that's a kid-only thing. I don't think that's a, developing.
I think it's like distinct in adolescence. It's a thing that's there. But yeah, so anyway, Sticky Faith by Kara Powell. You can get that, I think, like Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon, which is where we're all getting our books anyway. Or your local independent bookseller. It's about $9 or $10.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I would say for parents, a book that helped me understand, because I'm a boy, that helped me understand female social structure was Queen Bees and Wannabes. If you've seen the movie Mean Girls, Tina Fey read this book, then wrote a movie based on it, which is funny if you read the book, because there are like quotes from the book in the movie on like these characters' lips, and it's hilarious. But just kind of understanding female social structure. Specifically adolescent girl social structure. I will not definitely say that I've seen hints of this in adult female social structure, but it may exist. That's another book that's just really helpful in helping navigate those years. And just the other thing I will say to parents is, I just had the opportunity, I was down in Hilton Head on vacation. I got to speak at Hilton Head High School and Bluffton High School, connections through actually my sophomore English teacher, Cindy Sturgis, and her daughter, Jessica Phillips, who are now living down there. I get about 200 letters back in response to this lecture that I do on poetry.
Oh, yeah, I was reading about this online. You posted some of the results. I thought they were really interesting.
Yeah, so a couple things came out of this. But there are a couple things that just stood out to me. Is one, our students are really lonely. And a lot of our students they don't think their parents hear, which is part of adolescence. This is a thing that adolescents have felt for a long time. Mm-hmm. Again, this is all anecdotal, so someone with a research degree can tell me why I'm wrong, and I might be.
But
so
200 samples is a lot.
I mean, yeah, and they were talking about a lot of stuff. And to be fair, they were forced to write this. But in, like, some of the letters that would get into my life and my existence and the things I'm thinking about, because it's not just about poetry. It's 90 minutes of me talking about myself. Clearly a thing that's difficult for me to do. But what I get is, like, students aren't hearing from their parents, not just... An important thing I think in parenting is telling your kid that what they do matters. Like, everything that you do matters, whether it's good or bad. One of the things that my goals for, like, my son is that he knows that his good behavior matters. So when he does something well, is acknowledging it. Now, it's not like, here's a trophy we're celebrating, because that's my gig, not his. But it's it's to acknowledge things he does well, but also to acknowledge the things that he does poorly, right? So when he misbehaves, we call that out, and we work through correcting that, and like, what is the behavior we want, and that sort of thing. A lot of our students aren't hearing either. They literally don't think that what they do matters.
Yeah.
And so I think parents, just the realization that even though your kids start to, like, grow up, and even before adolescence, just having those conversations and recognizing, like, I've got to make sure that I am talking to my kid like they matter, and I hear them, and I'm participating in discussion with them, and you know, that doesn't mean they get to run the house, right? The most important thing for my son right now is that he knows that, like, my relationship to him, his relationship to me is not the most important relationship to me in the world. The most important relationship that I have is with my wife, like, human relationship, and my son is, like, number two, and that is the safest place for him. Because if he screws up something majorly in high school, like, okay, we fix it and we grow and we suffer those consequences, but we move forward together, right, as a family. But he doesn't ruin the family, or this kind of thing. Like, that pressure's not on him. Yeah. His pressure is to grow into the human being that God created him to be. And that's not a thing he does by himself. It's a thing we help him as a family, but, like, he's not the most important person in my life.
And it's important for, like, not only the parents to have, I mean, for the parent in that case to set that boundary, but also for them to explain that to their kid. Because I had a lot of friends growing up, their parents got divorced and they thought it was their fault. Yeah. Because I assume they thought that their relationship was at that same level, that if they made a mistake, it would impact what was above them.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I've seen that in students as well. Is like, what did I do so wrong that my parents got divorced? Which, as adults, we hear that and we think, oh, that's nonsense, right? Except I know a ton of adults that when they sit down and think about it, like, they still also feel that it's their fault that their parents got divorced. Yeah. And it's not. Adults made decisions and impacted the rest of the family, right? Yep. But, like, being able to talk through that through. So parents just like, telling your kid the stuff that they like. Especially, I think it's difficult in fathers, because we are still only about 120 years out from moving from fathers and sons working side by side as kind of the norm. You know, like, if you were to ask my grandfather, if he were still alive, like, did your dad love you? Like, he would think that's a ridiculous question, probably, but he would say, yeah, probably. You know, if we had the conversation. Again, there's a couple things. He's alive, and we were having this conversation. Neither which of those things are true. That he say, yeah, I think my dad loves him, because he worked side by side with his dad, right, and his brothers. Then you go out down a generation, all of a sudden, like, fathers and sons aren't working next to each other anymore, because fathers are working, sons are at school, and then they go to college or they go into the workforce, and they're just not that side by side. So, like, there's this feeling of, like, does my dad love me? And then language, and, like, this is a thing that's being talked about for the first time after, like, post-World War II. And so just trying to figure out how for fathers to express to sons especially, like, I love you, I care about you, I also cannot let you just do what you want. I have to help you become a good man.
Well, yeah, and for a lot of people, they may not, a lot of men may not know the difference between love and respect, and that goes for women too, because generally speaking, one's going to prefer one or the other and assume that's what it is. So, like, if I prefer respect, I'm going to assume that if I'm receiving respect, that's actually love. Yeah. And if someone wants love and you're giving them respect, they're like, why don't you love me? It's like, well, I do. But in reality, you're respecting them and you're not loving them in the way that they desire.
Yeah. Speaking of, if I were going to recommend another book to parents, because here's the other thing I've seen kind of in ministry and just in life in general, is that a lot of times parents will be like, fix my kid, right? And it's not
therapy.
But the issue isn't always a student. The actual issue is that students are like sponges. They absorb what's ever in the house. Yeah. And so if my parents have a rough marriage or they're not getting along, even if you've never fought in front of your kid's aware of the atmosphere in the house. And so, parents, great book to kind of read together is you're trying to figure out how you love each other and how you love your kids well, is this book called How We Love. I am not going to try to say the author's last name. It's a husband and wife team. I'll just mess it up. But it's a book called How We Love. There's a workbook that goes along with it. It's on Amazon that you can get. And so I think it's a really great book. Students, especially as we start moving into high school, are you ready for it? Can you guess?
You just recommended it to somebody, and I thought I should let you know that I owe you commission or referral fee or something.
So everyone's sick of me telling people to read this book, but it's Boundaries by Townsend and Cloud. And yes, there's a workbook. It's a book that I think everyone should read right around freshman year of high school for the first time. If you're hearing about this, because a lot of our issues that we have are poor boundaries with ourselves, with other people. We don't recognize our own toxic behavior. We don't see how we're allowing other toxic people to interact. Mm-hmm. The ability to say no is one of the most powerful positive things we have in our own life. And so this book really speaks to that. And good community, good interactions, good friendships, good relationships all require good boundaries. And so Boundaries by Townsend and Cloud. Nice thing is that they are both like therapists with like degrees, and this is research and based on their practice and that kind of stuff. And I love it. But if you're in your 20s or 30s, and you've never read this book, it's a must read. Just in one self-evaluation, and even if you think like I've got this together, you don't. And even if you do, there's nothing wrong with being a lifelong learner who sometimes finds out, you know what, I have this together, but now I have a resource to give to somebody who doesn't. So I don't get money for that book, but I have given out lots of copies.
You should. I can't even try to count the number of times I've heard you recommend it.
Because I think it's a really powerful book.
But to be fair, I think it's really cool whenever somebody is inspired by something so much that they, whether it helped them or it inspired them, whatever the case is, that they're willing to, like, regardless of the context of a conversation, they'll just, here's this thing and it's amazing and you all need to know about it. It's like CrossFit, but it actually helps you. I hope nobody actually.
So what you just found out is that you're never going to be sponsored by a CrossFit gym. That just happened.
Well, maybe. You know what? If somebody has a problem with that, come in. Let's have a podcast with you. I want to learn about CrossFit because I know nothing about it other than when I'm in a place and someone announces it, which is usually within a few seconds of them walking in.
How do you know someone who does CrossFit? Don't worry, they'll tell you in like the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's a stereotype. Because we just aren't informed on this topic, so come in and inform me. Because
I've got lots of friends who do CrossFit, and they're awesome, lovely people, and it's great. I am clearly not doing CrossFit. I go to Planet Fit. I do it 3 times a week with a buddy.
Nice.
Do a little lifting, do a little cardio, little bit at a time,
Baby steps, man.
Baby steps.
Right.
And so by the time I'm dead, I should have made some real progress. So.
I think that's awesome. All right, we are pushing that time limit.
Oh yeah.
So let's do some rapid fire here.
Okay.
All right. So in regards to community,
yes.
What are your goals?
So for me,
maybe just like 2 or 3.
Yeah. So for me, community is a place where people have a seat at the table and they belong. It's not a place where everyone agrees, but it's a place where there's hospitality, there's love, there's grace and space for movement, and where we can become who we were designed to be, right? So community is not my community that I have amongst my friends is not necessarily the same one that I have with my officers at the police department, even though those worlds cross in a lot of ways, or maybe at church. But what I try to do is create around me space where people are able to be who they are, feel loved, and feel the ability to be who they actually are. It's warm and engaging.
Yeah.
So I would say that's my big goal for community.
Now, you'd mentioned some of your teachers, but that was specifically for English. Did you have any inspiration growing up for why you're so big into pushing for the value of meaningful long-term relationships?
Yeah, so when I think about relationships and why it's been so important to me is I've had lots of people pour into my life in a meaningful way over the course of my life, and every time I have to do this, it's like I leave people out and I feel so bad about it. But like I think about Peter and Patty Wiley, who taught me the value of like you love people where you're at, and you create your house becomes a space for people to be loved there. And I felt that with a lot of other people at CCC. I think about people who helped me kind of think through my own stuff. and whatnot, and just like figuring out like, hey, Bundick, you're kind of toxic in these ways, and you need to grow up. Those conversations were maybe happening a little later than I'd like to admit, but those kind of things.
Yeah.
I went to Taylor University in Upland, Indiana, and which just keeps topping that U.S. News and World Report, best colleges in America.
They're up there, man.
I just can't. I mean, it's almost embarrassing how often Taylor has taken that number one spot. I cannot say enough about Taylor University in Upland, Indiana. If I get an honorary doctorate, I'm not going to argue it, because that's going to be the only way I get that doctorate. But no, I went to Taylor, and so intentional community was part of the ethos there. It was one of those things that you kind of got sick of hearing, intentional Christian community. But this idea of community where you confront, like where if someone says something about you or someone hurts you, you don't just tell everybody else. You go and talk to that person. What it means to have servant leadership where you serve first as opposed to like top down telling people what to do. But living in community, I learned a lot about it there. Ran into this book by a theologian by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who has this amazing story pre-World War II, like basically saying like, I love Jesus, I can't be on Team Nazi. Like that sort of thing that comes up. And he will actually wind up dying days before the end of the war in a concentration camp because he's hung by the Nazis. And anyway, but he's writing this book about community. It's called Life Together by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And it is just this amazing work. Actually, if I know it's rapid fire, I got a quote that because when I found out we were going to talk about community, that I was like, I need to get this right. So there's two things he says about community in this book, Life Together. The first one I want to say is the person who loves their dream of community will destroy community, but the person who loves those around them will create community. Yeah. And this idea of like community is never ideal. It is never perfect. It is never without blemishes. It always has warts. It always has pimples. It always has things that aren't great about it. You will always find a reason to say the community I'm in is not nearly good enough, but that one over there might be. And as soon as you interact with that one, you're going to mess that up, right? Because community is never perfect. The dream of community is not, if you're trying to live towards it, you're never going to miss it. But if you're never going to achieve it. Yeah. But if you're able to just genuinely say, these are the people I've got. Yeah. And I'm going to love them. I'm going to speak hard truth, but I'm also going to like speak grace, and I'm also going to live grace, and I'm going to like put up with annoyances. And when they hurt me, I'm not just going to withdraw and say, no. This is cancel culture. We're done. I'm going to actually press in and say like, this is where you hurt me, and we need to figure out like how to move forward. Or when I mess up, you apologize. Yeah. I'm sorry, by the way, not an apology. I'm sorry for, it was wrong because, in the future I will. Will you forgive me? That was a free bonus. But being able to apologize when we mess up. The other thing that he says.
Did you take that from? Is that from one of the premarital books where it's like the apology languages?
No. I got that from a mom blog. Oh, okay. But I don't know the name of the mom blog.
There's so interject real quick. Yeah. The different like how people desire love. You have different love languages. Like if you do something for somebody, they'll appreciate significantly more than another, whether that be giving your time or a word of affirmation. But in the same way, there's apology languages. So if I apologize to you in one way, and I did the exact same thing to someone else and apologized to them, you guys would interpret that very differently. One of you would be like, oh, reconciled, we're good. And the other one may be like, yeah, nah, that ain't, saying sorry is not going to cut it. Yeah. I need to see action changes. Another person's like, oh, just the words are enough, or you explained why. Yeah. And that's enough for me. So like you said, just kind of elaborating on that a little bit.
Yeah, just I think usually those 4 steps usually cover a lot of that. Yeah. And also, if nothing else, it's like, I'm sincere, I'm trying. Because it's like when your parents are like, apologize to your sister. I'm sorry. Like you mean it.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry more? It's like, no. Like
+2.
Double +2 on the apology there. Is that good or so? But the other thing that Bonhoeffer says is, let him who cannot be alone beware of community. Let him who is not in community beware of being alone. Each by itself has profound perils and pitfalls. One who wants fellowship without solitude plunges into the voids of words and feelings, and the one who seeks solitude without fellowship perishes in the abyss of vanity, self-infatuation, and despair. Basically, as people, we need community, but we also need to be by ourselves. And we need to be by ourselves, but we also desperately need community. Yeah. And so for those of us who are like, I don't need to be around people, you do.
We're social.
We are social beings. But people who are like, I just need to be in community all the time. My fellow Enneagram 7s. We need to figure out solitude.
Or 3s.
Oh, really? I didn't.
But without people, we aren't worth anything. I need your affirmation.
I don't need your affirmation. I just need you around.
Honestly, it can get that way.
Yeah. So, and, you know, but like this need for solitude in that. So anyway, so yeah, so there's that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can talk for hours about Enneagrams. Let's not jump down that. Okay.
I mean, we can do. I'll come back for the Enneagram stuff.
Actually, that would be really cool. I didn't even think about that as a topic. We're talking about different things you can come on and talk about, and community just stood out to me.
Oh, okay.
Enneagrams, I would have to rebrief myself, but as a 3, I learned about myself and stopped caring after.
I was a 7 with an 8 wing. I'm really excited to talk about it. If we can have a party around it, also, I'm going to dominate that conversation. Not that has happened today.
I feel like today has been pretty even. All right, we got 3 more maybe. Learning. Is there? You mentioned some books. What has been the most helpful for you? Whether that's a book, a mentor, anything that stands out.
Yes. I think one of the important things is being a lifelong learner. And that means finding people who are older than you, who know stuff, who are further along in the journey. So in whatever you're doing, just finding people to say intentionally, like, hey, will you mentor me? Will you disciple me?
Yeah.
Will you help me walk along? I think resources opened, like my friend Luke Erb, who I really enjoy, has got this really great rule that he told me about, that for every 5 books that he reads that he like is in a general agreement with, or he thinks it like, oh yeah, this is probably my speed, or something that's like in my general view of the world, he tries to read one book that's not.
That's good.
And the idea is like, it's not a 1-for-1 balance, but it's a reminder that there are other people out there who have different views, who also have souls and are human beings, right? And so hearing from sources that I don't agree with, but also making sure that it's not like I'm just blindly taking it in, but I'm also not being so hypercritical I can't hear or see that person's a human being. And I think that's a thing that we suffer from, is that we want community only with people who are just like us, and that is dangerous. Whenever we have seen in the 20th century communities of people who just want to be with people just like them, it's not the best. So like, we need some people we disagree with. And then the other thing is just being open to learning from people who are younger than you. Like whether it is like just technology, processes, these kinds of things, or even just life experience. I think that is a thing that is, you know, really great. To be able to hear from people who are younger than us and have that inform our best practices, especially if you're in a position of leadership. So if you are running a business, running a church, running a not-for-profit, if you're 35, 45, 55, 65, 75, whatever, and you have no one younger than you speaking into the direction and like the ethos of you're going to die as a community and as what you're doing, because you've just devalued an entire way of seeing the world. And your way's not wrong, but you need to understand that doesn't work for everybody. And on the other side of that is if you're like 25 and like working in a new business or working in a startup or working somewhere, and they're like, I just don't have a significant voice. It's like, earn your place at the table. You
have to prove that you're capable of competing.
That does not happen in 6 months. Let me just tell you that it can, but I would say maybe count on like just doing your job, doing it well, showing up, doing the hard work, going beyond expectations, and doing that for a year or 2 years gets you to the point where like people will start to count on you and ask you questions.
Are we talking about David Baker?
We are talking about David Baker.
You just have a good work ethic, man.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. Misunderstandings. What's the biggest misunderstanding people have about you?
So many.
What's the biggest? What's the one you get? Either the one you answer the most, or the one you're most annoyed by answering. You don't have to specify which one's which.
I mean, I get asked, do I get darker in the summer? And the answer is yes.
All right. Well,
Black people do tan. If you want to know that. No, I think
for people listening on audio only, John Bundick is black.
Oh, that has not come up, has it? I don't have a particularly. It's been gently put. I don't have a black voice.
I would say you don't have a dialect. You are very Midwest.
I am. I've got that Midland really well. It's hard to tell until I say worship. Now, am I talking about a boat with guns, or am I talking about like singing songs to Jesus? Like,
why not both?
Ooh. We could talk about pacifism for years. I got so many thoughts. Anyway, so I think
do you have a misunderstanding that isn't about race?
No, the room just got real uncomfortable. No, I think one of the misunderstandings that I think people have with me is that I don't like my alone time, and that I'm just always like I think people think sometimes it's like, oh, Bundick's just got like thoughts and things hanging all the time. Sometimes I'm not thinking about anything. Sometimes I need alone time, and like I also really care about people, but I also am trying to figure out how to care about myself sometimes. And you know, that's boundaries. Yeah, I'm still working that out. If I'm being 100% honest, I tend to know a little bit more than some of the people I'm around.
Yeah.
But I still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think just one misunderstanding for pastors in general. I'm going to speak for you and every single pastor because I'm not one.
Oh yeah. Speak for us.
Sometimes pastors personally don't want to hear everything at that very moment because they're a real person with a real life, and sometimes their minds are elsewhere. They're going through life, and I'm sure you guys love to be there and support people, but sometimes you personally may just it may not be the best timing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting working in a church. Is that sometimes like if you have a bad day or you have an interaction where I don't think that I've been terrible to someone, like I find out that like it's the most offensive thing to a person, and it's like I was literally just on my way to the restroom. I was kind of in a hurry, right? Like
you didn't wave at me. It's like, well, it was an emergency, man.
Listen, I was either going to get to the restroom or one or both of us was going to be very embarrassed, right? So, or whatever. And so, yeah, I think that's a thing sometimes. I genuinely love my job, and I love interacting and connecting with people. But sometimes I just, I've got bad days too. So
human, man.
Yeah, I try.
Advice. Do you have a cute quote? You got anything real short for advice?
Leaders take notes. Like that's one. Again, if you are in your 20s or 30s and you're like, I want to make my mark on the world, show up, be on time, do the hard work.
Yeah.
Like show up early, leave late. And it's not easy. And the other thing I'd say is your 20s can be what you make them. And if you do your 20s well, it sets you up really well for your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So that's things like financial planning, doing things to intentionally know who you are, like finalize an identity, so that if you have significant relationships, you're able to like do those well, and taking your baggage from baggage and turning it into luggage. It's into like a nice little wheel thing, and you carry it around. And sometimes you're like, "Hey, person, let me show you my luggage. Here's like all the stuff, but now we're gonna pack it back up and wheel it around, right?" Yeah. Like so.
And generally, the more you do that, the easier it is to pack it.
Yes, it is. That's true. I'm not a therapist, and so everything I said might have just been terrible. But
that's bad theology.
But yeah, no, but I'd say, and so those kinds of things to prep yourself for success later, because you've got the most flexibility and the most freedom to do those things.
If somebody's 18 to 25 and they're looking for a mentor, where do you? I'm prodding now. I mean, maybe you don't have an answer, but is there somewhere that you would recommend for people to get advice for either financial, emotional, physical, spiritual, that type of, just somebody older to ask some questions?
I mean, the first thing I'd say is like look around your world, and if there's someone you're like, I like how they do this aspect of life, saying like, hey, you do this really well, because most people like to hear what they do well. It's like, I've seen you do this well, and I would love to learn a little bit from you. Can we meet? You know, can we get breakfast? Can we get coffee or whatever it is on this regular basis so I can learn from you?
Yeah.
Excuse me. That's probably not
that's advice I've lived by. It's helped me. So I haven't had any negative experiences yet. So
yeah, I mean, you'll find people who like mentor that like it's not that great, but usually you learn something.
Exactly.
Maybe not what you thought you were going to.
Learn about. I'm gonna ask him. And what's for people, anybody out there, anybody listening, anybody that stuck around this long, if they got some questions for you, John, if they want to reach out, maybe they want to talk about CCC, or maybe they want to get your input on books or anything like that, what where can they find you?
Well, any elder millennial. I was one of the first people at Taylor University, first 100 on Facebook, and I'm still on the Facebook. So
quite actively.
Yeah.
Shade.
It's good for like people over 35 to communicate things to them. So it's it's John Bundick, Bundick. That's the name. You can find me on Instagram and occasionally on Twitter, but not like I don't tweet all that often. It's at CNHS Shot Putter. Yeah, I know. Like I'm still like, and you'll note that a lot of those things became common after I was out of high school. Still using at CNHS Shot Putter, even though I am, not really shot putting anymore. But so that's where you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Those are the places I'm like most active, I guess. So,
right on, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate your time, John.
It's been awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity and the nice things you said about like me being like influential or something. That was very nice of you.
Thanks, have a lot of friends in my circle that we attended groups that you led, and I would say the influence has occurred.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. It's been real cool hanging out, and I hope that this has been like beneficial for somebody.
Yeah.
So.
If you guys want to hear about Enneagrams, we'll bring it back on because I had no idea where this conversation was going to go today. I liked it though.
No, I did too.
Nice.
So
I did it again.
Oops. No, wait, you have to pay for that if I sing that.
I bumped my ear again. So, guys, thank you for sticking around, checking out the channel, listening to John Bundick share his story, to talk about ministry, talk about community and relationships, the importance of them. He didn't say it, but Facebook is not an alternative for real relationships.
Oh, it is not. It is not at all.
It's artificial. But it's a great way to get connected. And if you guys want to get connected on Facebook, we have TRIFLIX LLC. We also have TRIFLIX.com. Go check that out. And specifically for if you have any recommendations for guests, if you know somebody you're like, oh, they're making cakes and they make some really cool cakes. Let's have them on because we actually have somebody coming on soon that makes cakes.
You know who you should have?
Who?
Tyler and Alyssa Hodge from Lukaby.
Really?
Oh my gosh,
that'd be awesome.
They'd be amazing because like they even like speaking of community, like their whole vision. I want to tell their story because they need to come and tell it. Yeah. Tyler and Alyssa, if you're watching, this is me speaking directly to you right now. Tyler and Alyssa, you need to come into this room and just share your story and talk about your coffee house where I spend so much of my time, and just saying.
Yeah.
Also, I've got an immense amount of points there, which is pretty cool. So,
but
anyway, tell Alyssa, come here.
We would appreciate it.
Talk about the coffee.
Definitely. Yeah. So this has been TriFlix Cast, hosting all of these wonderful discussions, and it's made possible by sponsors, people that really support what it is that we're doing here, like Hills Iron Records. So if you're watching and you just want to continue supporting it at what we're doing here, or maybe you know a company that would like to come on and talk or support financially, feel free to check us out on TRIFLIX.com. Other than that, hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Same to you, John.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good one, Tristan.